Welcome back to the Quick Save Podcast. My name is Alex.
I'm Josh.
And today, we're going to jump into something new. We're going to be talking on the podcast about a console, like a whole console.
Yeah, we're going to do a retrospective on what console?
The Atari 2600.
The granddaddy.
Yeah, so we're going to look back at the history of like certain parts of gaming. We're probably going to go in order, I think, is where we want to go with this.
Yeah, we're going to start kind of with the granddaddy and just move forward, mainly talking about consoles and stuff like that. Maybe some other topics that come up within those.
Everything that mattered into how we got to where we are today in gaming.
And we're gonna gloss over a lot of stuff. We're not gonna go in depth about every single aspect of everything, but we're gonna give you kind of a general overview, so that way you have kind of an idea of the history of where we kind of get home consoles from and where we see a lot of this stuff that is still around today.
Maybe we'll reveal some things of like, hey, I really liked the Super Nintendo. Well, man, here's this crazy thing about it.
I'll be like, yeah, exactly. Now you know all these fun facts you can bring up at parties.
You show off to your other video game friends and be like, hey, the Super Nintendo was this.
I got a fact about Pac-Man that's going to make you guys lose your freaking minds.
What is the 2600? 2600, originally known as the VCS, which stands for Video Computer System, was created by Atari in 1977. After they achieved success in the arcade market...
They're making those arcade games, baby, quarter eaters.
After getting the whole thing started, the CEO, Nolan Bushnell, sold the company to Warner due to the lack of money he had.
We'll talk about that in a bit, I think.
There was some money trouble straight off the bat. Yikes.
Yeah, there's a recurring theme for the Atari Corporation.
The 2600 was finished the very next year, and it revolutionized console gaming as well as the consumer electronics business. It was a huge splash in this lake of electronics.
It was a big deal, not just for like, whoa, you can play video games at home, but it's also like kind of opened the idea to a lot of people of like, wow, having the concept of having something you couldn't have at home is kind of revolutionizing.
Yeah, I mean, you got to think the 70s. There was no like big, huge home entertainment. There's television, there's radio. Board games were like the go-to.
Books, play outside.
Magazines.
Fight with your brothers out in the dirt.
Run a fight club in the backyard. But I mean, like, there was no big electronic things at home that kids strive for.
Yeah, this was a big technological advancement because it was, something that theoretically a lot of people in the family could use.
Gone were the days of going to your local arcade. Only to spend $20 in quarters trying to beat Donkey Kong on the machine. We all been there. We all been sitting in front of that thing
Put the quarter on the screen, you say, I got next.
I need to beat this. Here's my quarter. I'm going to jump that barrel. But now, you could have Donkey Kong in your home. Jump over those barrels over and over in the comfort.
No more quarters needed.
No more quarters. You're sitting on the couch. We're finally going to start using that lazy couch potato aspect. Oh my God, the kid, instead of going out and playing with the stick in some dirt, he's sitting on the couch at home in front of this TV I just bought.
We use this TV to watch the Jackie Gleason show. Now he's playing freaking asteroids.
He's got this blip on the screen. And he's telling me that he needs to get it hooked up. What does he need to hook up? We get our information via antenna. It's already built in.
It's already hooked up. This guy wants to hook it up. It's already hooked up.
So, Josh, tell me how it was developed.
Atari Incorporated, the company. They already had a home console. It was a system that only played Pong. Wow, revolutionary. You could play Pong or not play Pong. Those were your two options.
Simple as it gets.
Yeah, simple as it gets. They competed with Magnavox, who made the Odyssey, the Odyssey 2. We'll see that come back a little bit later. Which at that time, Magnavox was the only other company really trying to create a home console at the time. Nobody else was really in the market yet. And so while the Pong system was kind of a small success, it did not sell 10 billion units or anything, but it was okay. Early Atari engineers plainly saw the writing on the wall. Maybe we shouldn't have a system that can only play one game. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe making 30 different consoles that all play one game, maybe that's not a good business strategy. So instead, they were like, what if we created a system that could play multiple games, right? That had programmable microprocessors that we could program these chips, whatever, and then each game was a different thing, and the system could read those games.
Looking back on season 1, we talked about this kind of with Solomon's Key. Processors were huge back in the day.
That's pretty much
the bread and butter.
That's the whole thing. Is like making these games is pretty much locked behind what microprocessors can we currently buy as a company.
Computing power was a race. That's the least to say about it.
Well, speaking of, Atari meets with Motorola. They're like, "Hey, Motorola, love you guys.
We love you, Atari.
We would love to use your microchips that you have."
Oh, golly, I think we can make that happen.
Perfect. Sounds good. Well, we'll keep talking about this in a bit, all right? Have a good one.
All right, we'll go get that started right now.
Okay, Motorola's going to go get that started right now. So then Atari is hanging out. Then they go to this company called MOS Technology, who is releasing, they say, "Hey, MOS Technology.
Yeah, what you got going on, Atari?
Now, we were thinking about going with Motorola. We want to make a home console. Does that sound interesting?"
A home console?
Yeah, you can play.
What an idea.
You can play a bunch of different video games.
Let me tell you something. I got some of them just getting out to market. Something real good.
Okay, sure. How much are your cutting edge chips?
$25.
A piece? Not a chance. I couldn't do it, says Atari. You're breaking the bank. What if you give me your second-rate chips and you throw in a second kind of technological piece with that? How much would that cost?
$12.
12 a piece for the pair? I'll take it. I'll take it in a heartbeat.
Nice doing business.
So Atari buys these chips, these pairs. They get all these chips for pretty, I mean, we say decently cheap. I think it's like $12 back then is like, I think somebody did the math, it's like $56 now or something like that or whatever.
Yeah, this was big money.
Yeah.
Don't think it wasn't. This was big money.
They're spending $12 for these pairs of chips, which are not like the cutting edge, but it's like cutting edge for what they can afford. Atari buys all the chips. They're going to start building the thing. Ring on the phone. Ring, ring. Hello. Who is it?
It's me, Motorola.
Oh, hey, what's up, Motorola? We
got those chips ready for you.
Oh, sorry, what? No, sir, that wasn't like a done thing. We spoke to MOS Technologies. We're going with the MOS chips. They cut me a deal.
But I told the bosses this was a done deal.
No, it was not a done... What? It was not even close to a done deal.
What you mean? We talked.
No, you need to talk to MOS Technologies, and it's not a done deal. We're going with MOS. You talk to them.
Oh, golly, I'll be talking to them soon.
And so Motorola files a lawsuit against MOS Technologies.
Call the lawyers. I ain't gonna have none of this beeswax.
As if it's MOS's fault. I don't know what the lawsuit was about. It was Atari's fault, I feel like. Whatever. So they sued MOS. And Motorola had started process, and they told management, yeah, we're good. This Atari deal's like a for sure thing. For sure. And then Atari's like, yeah, no, we're going to go with MOS instead. And Motorola's like, dude, you just completely screwed us. So then they go sue MOS.
When you put it in retrospective, it's just so dumb because it's literally like, would you have interest in working with us? And they're like, yes, we'll be right there.
Well, and there's more to it than that. If maybe Atari signed a contract of exclusivity or something like that, and MOS is like breaking this contract. I don't know, but it all feels like it's on Atari's
We are making pebbles out of some boulders.
Right. It definitely feels like it's Atari's fault and not MOS Technologies. But all right, Atari gets these chips. They hire a bunch of engineers and developers to begin work on the 2600 prototype called Project Stella, which is named after one of the head engineers' brand of bicycle. So design is somewhat influenced by the Channel F, Channel F being the first home console. Channel F beats them to the bit just by a short amount of time.
There's a reason no one really knows what Channel F is.
I think it was like preloaded, right? It had some games on. I don't think it had like swappable cartridges, or if it did, it wasn't a lot. It just wasn't supported a lot. Atari took a lot of the best ideas from the Channel F and kind of integrated it into the Atari. But yeah, a big thing that they took specifically from the Channel F was the way they prevent like static buildup, like the console's like plastic. Some design elements, the design of the cartridges, I'm pretty sure was taken from the Channel F system. They definitely had a little bit of inspiration from Channel F. So then Atari needs funding, right? So this is the part we get to where he sold the company, right? Atari needs money bad. They reach out to Warner Communications. Yes, that Warner like Warner Brothers Communications, right? Warner says, yes, we have interest. Because Warner's kind of seeing a dip in their, like, other media stuff. Music and stuff is kind of on the downswing at this moment. So Warner thinks that they can make up profits by funding the video game industry. So they give Atari $120 million to finish the 2600 in 1976. The very next year, 1977, the 2600 is released, and then the company is bought for, I think it was $28 million or something like that.
Ludicrous money is what we're hearing.
Yeah,
And
so Warner gave them $120 million to build the console, and then they bought them for $28 million that year. The system's built. It's called the Atari Video Computer System, the VCS, and it's released September 1977 at $199, which is about $900 in our money.
Which is incredible.
Like, people complain about the Xboxes being like $500 and the PS5s and stuff. Imagine if the PS6 came out and it was just like straight up $1,000. You'd be like, not a chance.
I've looked at like some early consoles and like it's like I think come like 96 or so is when we start seeing it like level out to like what it costs today. So like the PS5 is like $650. And then like I looked at, I think it was like maybe it was like the N64 sign. If you were to take inflation into account and stuff, it came out to be like $400 or $500. Like there's a certain point, I think around like 90s, early 2000s, where we see this level out.
Yeah, the prices drop. Well, I mean, it's all dependent on the computer chip prices, right? If you can get chips for cheap, you can charge less for your consoles, you know? So, all right, let's check in with our friends at Atari here. It's been a year since they built the VCS. How's it going? Not great. They've made 800,000 units, and they've sold about 550. Seems okay, right? Well, I mean, it's not amazing, right? You've still got...
It's a lot of back stock.
Yeah, you still got 250,000 consoles just sitting around. So Warner Communications helps cover losses. This is going to be a recurring theme for Warner Communications, is they're going to be covering losses for the Atari Corporation. And then, all right, well, why isn't it selling very well? Well, a lot of people, you're a consumer. You're watching the Jackie Gleason show at home. SNL's just hitting the airwaves. You're laughing away at Chevy Chase doing the Weekend Update. Video games don't exist. Somebody hands you an Atari. You don't know how to use it.
Yeah, the cartridge comes out.
What do you mean the cartridge comes out?
Yeah, you can take this game out and put another game in.
That's not how arcade machines work.
Arcades are, established cabinets.
You
that
got
just
one
stand
thing,
there and do one game.
One thing is one thing. What do you mean this can be multiple things? So consumers don't really know how to use it, at least not super effectively yet.
And they're probably, honestly, back in that day, they probably weren't really sure if they needed something like that.
Yeah, so here's this new thing. We don't know how it works. New technology is scary, whatever, right? So it's not selling great. Video games in the home are not a well-established thing yet. But also, not even just that, there's some competition at this time. We've got the Magnavox Odyssey 2 and the Mattel Electronics Intellivision as well. So Atari's not the only cool kid on the block. We got a couple other consoles kind of eating into the market share here. Both of those consoles are also cartridge swapping consoles, just for reference as well there. But so it's the next year, right? So it's been a couple years. 1979, here's Atari's big break. They get the license for Taito's arcade hit Space Invaders.
Talk about a giant game.
Yep.
Like, we think Space Invaders nowadays is huge. Back then, that's like talking about, the new God of War or Elden Ring
this was
Final Fantasy.
This, in my opinion, single-handedly turned the 2600 into a hit, was releasing Space Invaders. Doubled sales, easily, for the 2600, over doubled sales. 1 year later, 1979, they release Space Invaders. By 1980, they sell over 2 million consoles.
Overnight.
Yeah,
Just
overnight.
overnight.
78, we've sold 500,000 units. 2 years later, we have sold an extra 1.5 million units, largely in thanks to Space Invaders. And that wasn't going to be the final success here for the Atari 2600. Only 2 years later, right? So the success of this Space Invaders can't be understated. 1982, we've sold over 10 million units. So what, in a span of 4 years, we went from selling 500,000 units to selling another 9.5 million on top of that. But there's a lot of other stuff that comes out that helps that. So we've got like Pac-Man comes out, right? Pac-Man was a huge release. I think they sold over 2 million copies of Pac-Man alone, something like that, right? Because everybody wanted to play Pac-Man at home.
They were getting these huge arcade hits to come to console.
Yep, it's a big deal. Even though the port of Pac-Man on the Atari is probably one of the worst things to ever grace our lovely planet Earth.
I mean, most of the ports of like the big arcade hits that came to Atari, pretty bad.
Yeah, some are like fine, some are fine and playable, but like the Pac-Man one specifically is like...
It was rough.
It looks like it was designed, like graphic design was not the choice for that game. They were like, yeah, it's a bunch of rectangles and squares, that's what I got. So yeah, things are going great for it's 1982, things are going great for Atari. Don't read ahead to the paragraph that says video game crash in 1983, we're not going to get there yet. So trouble's on the horizon with the release of the ColecoVision. ColecoVision... Intellivision's kind of phased out. Odyssey's kind of phased out at this point. People aren't playing those as much. Only like the diehard nerds are playing stuff like that. But I got bad news. ColecoVision's coming out. ColecoVision has better technology. And it has better graphics. And it looks good. And it plays good. And people are buying it. 15 to 20% of the market share is getting eaten up by this damn ColecoVision. And why is that? Well, it comes bundled with Donkey Kong. Everybody wants to play Donkey Kong. Donkey Kong also later comes to Atari, but it's not for a while. The thing is, ColecoVision comes bundled with Donkey Kong. So the launch title for the 2600 was a game called Combat.
Honestly, kind of a fun game.
Right, but it's not Donkey Kong fun.
That is very true.
So the ColecoVision comes bundled straight out of the gate with Donkey Kong. Buy the console, get one of the biggest arcade hits ever. Period. And also, it plays good. So, Atari's market share goes down because people are buying the ColecoVision. So, this scares investors a lot. They're like, Atari, the video game market's volatile. Investors start pulling funding from Atari's company. They say, no, we're not going to back you guys anymore. The market's too unstable. Well, if the market's unstable, you know what you do? Destabilize it more by removing funds from the economy. So, now, Atari, a lot of the third-party developers have to shut down because nobody's buying Ataris. Since nobody's buying Ataris, Atari is not buying games from other companies because, hey, we can't sell the games because nobody's buying the consoles. So a lot of these third-party companies shut down, of which there were many, some even run by former 2600 devs. We'll talk about that a bit later. But all these teams shut down, which reduces not only the amount of games that come out for the Atari, but also the quality. You're losing a ton of folks who can work on this stuff, right? So
all these investors at this time, like this whole destabilization's happening, third-party companies are falling, Atari is weak in the knees.
Losing a lot of money. We'll get into numbers later.
And so is ColecoVision and everything. Like no one is doing well.
No one's safe. Yep.
It was speculated during this initial hit that this was the death of video games. We will never see it in the home again. The only people safe in this time frame were arcades, and even then they weren't doing that well because everyone was starting to go to home console, and then this whole thing's come crumbling down. So people are losing faith in video games really hard. So they were speculating at that time, we will never see another home console again. Video games are going to die out.
That was it. The way of the dodo. Video games are no more.
That was what people were looking at going into 83.
I'll never play a video game again. My money isn't safe with these damn things. Well, why don't you tell us about this video game crash 83 then?
All right, 1983 rolls around. The top song is Every Breath You Take by The Police. Wind's blowing in your hair. And the video game companies are falling to the ground. It's crashing all around. Atari is losing money like it's going out of style. So what are they going to do? What options do they have to reach for?
What possible options would Atari have right now?
They're going to bury their games that aren't selling in the middle of the desert.
Completely sane move. totally something a sane person would do is just bury thousands of games in the desert like a normal human being.
But hey, that's just a rumor, right?
It's true.
Didn't happen.
Yeah, wasn't real. Perpetrated by all the executives. Wasn't real, right?
Well, except for like in 2014 when they went to the landfill in the desert and uncovered thousands and thousands of games. 14 truckloads to be exact.
Yeah, so the real story is they had all this stuff that wasn't selling, games and consoles, you name it. They sent 14 truckloads out to the desert to bury it. I think so. I think this is to like claim it as a loss for like insurance fraud purposes, or like they were definitely trying to get some kind of weird financial gain out of this by pretending it didn't exist. But yeah, they just buried a bunch. So very famously, they buried. So E.T. around the time of this video game crash, they were like E.T. licensed games are cool. E.T.'s coming out, the extraterrestrial. The game was developed in 6 weeks, and it sucks. The game is really bad.
Like really bad,
So
like near unplayable.
So it was like, if this game's good, it'll save the Atari 2600. It was not good. It was really bad.
So 14 truckloads worth of stuff.
14 truckloads must get buried in the desert to pay for the sins of E.T. the extraterrestrial.
It's like they were doing a ritual, like a black magic ritual.
Exactly.
Instead of a human sacrifice, it's just sacrifice of video games.
Yep.
There is a small documentary out there. You
Yep.
can go find it. It's fun to watch. It's crazy seeing these people go out
It's
and
very
dating.
interesting. It's very interesting. So 1983 to 1984, we're in the middle of the crash here.
And Atari loses it all.
Yep.
Not literally all of it, but all. They lost $950 million that year.
Over the course of 2 years.
Or over the course of 2 years, I'm sorry. Warner is looking to cash out and quickly, so they sell the company for $240 million to the owner of Commodore. Now, Commodore, what? That sounds familiar. Yeah, that's because Jack Tramiel of Commodore 64 home computer fame,
Yep.
who essentially says, "I'm not really a console guy. I'm more of a PC guy."
He shuts down internal production of games at Atari. He says, no more Atari games. I'm not going to build any more Atari games. We're losing money on them.
Atari is scrambling to make up revenue, essentially.
Yep. 84, 85, all this stuff's kind of getting ready to come out. We got to compete.
86, they're just putting more consoles out. 87 hits, and they release a new console. Or that's what they want you to think.
To compete with the NES and the Sega Master System.
They wanted you to think it was brand new. They called it the Atari XE game system, or the XEGS. Now, what is an Atari XEGS, you might ask? Well, it's just an Atari 65
Pretty much a big
XE.
doorstop. It's a big doorstop or a paperweight.
It's an Atari 400 computer with a built-in keyboard that could play all 8-bit Atari games.
And a light gun.
And a light gun. Well, here's the problem with all of that, though. Since you just essentially rebadge something, you put a new shell on it. Guess what? There were issues, and there were issues that people complained about and talked about. And the XEGS was just a commercial failure, like hardcore commercial failure. They only made 100,000 of these things. So they are rare in the sense that there isn't a lot out there. And if you happen to see one, they're kind of cool, honestly. I was very lucky enough to own one. It's a pain in the ass to get working, to say the least. I fully understand why people complained about them and why there was only 100,000 of them made. But going off of that, games still get made by third-party companies for the 2600 all the way till 89 and 90. With the final game being the PAL, or the European, for those that aren't familiar, exclusive copy of Clax. In 86, an ad company boasted the console was under $50, and the console sold a little bit up until 1992. And that's when also every console they made at that point died. The XEGS, the 65XE, the 400, the 800.
Everything was formally discontinued at that point.
Even the 5200 and the 7800. Everything.
Yep, whole deal. We could talk about the legacy of Atari in a bit, because they still kind of exist.
Atari is more of this idea of where we came from.
I would disagree with that. There's still a company that now tries to sell cryptocurrency. So let's talk about some notable games on the system, huh?
Obviously, Combat.
Launch title. Yeah, probably one of the more common titles for the system.
I think, honestly, I think people are selling Combat. If you finally get a copy, I think people are selling it for like $2.
Couple bucks, yep.
It should be 50 cents.
Honestly, most Atari games are a couple bucks. There's a handful that are expensive. All the porn games are obviously expensive. Custer's Revenge and stuff like that.
Yep.
Those are expensive, but those are also made by a third-party development studio. Pac-Man. Again, like I said, they sold millions of copies of Pac-Man because people are like, dude, you can play Pac-Man at home. Isn't that so cool? Except it was an awful port that looked really bad. Pong. So they had the standalone Pong machine. They just released Pong on the system. And then they released paddle controllers, which are like the Pong little dials that you turn left and right. Speaking of paddle controllers, Breakout and Super Breakout, which is just the standard like
Brick Break.
Yep, Brick Break. Yep.
Then we got Hero,
Yep.
which was an action game.
You place bombs and you go through levels and you shoot little lasers and stuff like that.
Yeah, if anyone's a fan of Metal Jesus Rocks, it's one of his favorite Atari games. He has it on his like front intro right away. You'll see it says Hero. He does like a bunch of boasting of it. I haven't been able to play that game, but it looks like it would be a lot of fun.
Pitfall was a big one, the first platformer pretty much to ever exist.
Pitfall still goes strong today.
Donkey Kong is also on the system. Like I said, that was later after the ColecoVision stuff. Missile Command and Space Invaders, all these arcade classics. Frogger, Centipede, Dig Dug, and then E.T. Again, the game that was so bad they buried all the failures in the desert.
And that's just naming a few. I mean,
there's hundreds and hundreds of Atari games.
Atari had names out there that people recognize. My favorite Atari game is Demon Attack. It was made by a third-party developer called iMagic.
Indiana Jones
on this.
I think they did some Star Trek, maybe. That might have been till later, but...
The biggest complaint nowadays that I hear about the Atari is that, well, the graphics are bad. Bro, this is the 70s.
Yeah, it's like... I drew a picture of a guy. He looks like a stick figure, except I made him brown. That's what I got, man. If you play Adventure, they're like, here's a dragon. The dragon looks like a seahorse that, like, died.
Or a lot of times, like, I've seen dragons, and it's just like a snake, and it has, like, two, like, I think it's wings or arms.
Yeah.
The beauty of the Atari was the fact that you had to use your imagination.
Yeah,
to get
you
the
had
picture.
to pretend a lot, and we kind of see that into the NES era a little bit too, where it's like you're definitely having to imagine some things. But,
Atari was like, here's the bones, build everything else. NES was like, here's the bones and the guts, just put a skin on it.
Yep. Well, let's talk about this. This is the last thing that I kind of really wanted to mention here, and that is the lack of credits for developers.
This is huge.
I think NES has credits, right? Not everything, but maybe some of it does.
A lot of the credits, I think, are in the instruction manuals, if I remember right.
Yeah, but some games have just straight-up credit sequences and stuff like that. But so back in these days, games didn't all have credits, especially none of the Atari stuff had credits.
Wild West of gaming. I mean, it's the first time we're seeing home consoles. So
developers often work long days with no attribution of their work, never being recognized for their work. No matter how much, like, you could build a game. You read about these Atari developers, these engineers and stuff. They're literally, like, solo building a game.
Yep.
Like,
one guy.
One dude built, like, the whole cartridge and the whole game. And then Atari just, like, mass-produced it. Like, it's insane. The first Easter egg ever in gaming is from developer Warren Robinette, who hid his own name inside of the game Adventure.
Just so he could get credit.
Correct. Literally, the Easter egg is he attributed it himself, saying, I built this game. But yeah, a lot of people know that fact, mainly just because Ready Player One. Many of the original developers for the 2600 left either to work on separate projects. So I think I read an interview with Warren Robinette where they were like, hey, what did you go do? And he's like, oh, I worked at NASA. He worked somewhere else, but it was also, he did like edutainment games and stuff like that, interactive experiences, and like NASA, he was doing like some of their like VR training stuff or whatever, right?
Yeah, I worked at NASA, and I made this game.
Yeah, so he still made games and stuff, but it was just for different companies, mainly like edutainment stuff. But yeah, some of these developers even left Atari to start their own third-party company. Activision, the longest-running third-party like game developers in history, they were the first ones to break off and do it. which I don't think it was Jeff Keighley, but there's like some very famous, I think it was like at the Game Awards, which we mentioned last week. He was talking about like developers getting credit or something like that, and they brought somebody out who was like, here's this very famous dude who worked for Activision or something like that, like the founder of Activision who never got credit for any of his Atari games and stuff. So credits are honestly still kind of a disorganized concept in gaming. We'll throw a link below to a Kotaku article from a couple of years back about how modern game developers still struggle with credits. Who gets put where in the credits, right? Like if you do an alphabetical and your name is Aaron Aronson, well, that's the first name you're going to see every time is Aaron Aronson. Well, it's not fair for Aaron Aronson to be at the top, so we need to find a way that's kind of fair to everyone. So I think
that's why when we do games, we always like to try to look at the credits, see if there's any fun Easter eggs that people put in there. Look at
thanks to Cheetos.
Thanks to Cheetos. Thanks to eBay.
Thanks to
eBay. A big one.
Thanks to eBay. Yep. But I don't remember who it was. It was Naughty Dog or maybe Sony Santa Monica. It was somebody. They did it. So one game they did it last name A to Z, and then on the next game they did first name A to Z. So they kind of like switch it up every once in a while, so that way it's not just the same person at the top every time.
Yeah.
Which I think alphabetical, or some kind of variation of that seems fine. But yeah, if you look like at the Call of Duty stuff, I think they mentioned in the article is like Infinity Ward gets kicked off of a Call of Duty, or it was like somebody gets kicked off of Call of Duty and Infinity Ward comes in to pick up the pieces, and then the credits for that one, I think it was Modern Warfare 2, is just a list of names. It doesn't tell you what anybody did. It doesn't tell you what anybody worked on. It doesn't tell you who worked for Infinity Ward. It doesn't tell you who worked for the other company. It's just a list of names. So it's like that sucks for those developers. Like you could have spent 12 months of your life working on Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, and it's just like thanks to Terry.
Thanks to Terry.
Hey, good job, Terry. Thanks.
Woo, Terry.
We're not going to tell anybody what you did or how hard you worked. But good job, Terry. Thanks.
When it comes to credits, I think like obviously like director, producer, those are like names that probably should be at the top because like they really pushed it out there. They got it rolling, whatever.
Yeah.
I get like it's kind of like, well, do we put the audio developers above like
it gets so
recording
granular.
Engineers, or
right? So
like,
it gets so granular where it's like, okay, sure, we can all agree put the director and the producer and at the top. Okay, well, do we put the art guys or the writing guys first? Okay, well, writer guys, do we put the dialogue guys? Or do we put the narrative guys first in dialogue? Right? So it's like it becomes this really granular thing where it's like you can break it down one by one, but it's like eventually, we can't spend 8 hours talking about how the credits are going to be organized. At some point, you just need to like take it and be like, I don't know, just put a list on the thing.
It's hard. It's really hard because you want to give everyone credit.
Yeah, and again, it's. I think they also mentioned like in GTA 5. Maybe this was a different article I was reading. A bunch of like GTA 5 developers for Rockstar who were like contract based didn't get credited at all. Just like straight up, GTA 5. We were literally just talking about this how GTA Online is still
they're still beating this dead horse.
They're beating this dead horse of releasing new content. Yeah, there's just like a ton of people who did not get credited for working on that game at all. So credits are still a huge deal. It was a big deal back then that people didn't get credited, so much so that a dude had to hide his own name in the game that he built. And it's still a big deal today. Like it still happens. People aren't getting credited and not getting attributed to. So
yeah, the lack of developer credits in the early days of like game design and development was entirely attributed as a power play.
Yep.
It was from management to the developers to keep their talent under wraps and not to be picked off by the next up and coming video game team.
Because if you, Mr. Aaron Aronson, I put your, the Pac-Man port comes out and 10 million people buy the Pac-Man port and it says made by Aaron Aronson, the next big game company that comes along is going to say, hey, Aaron Aronson, Atari is paying you $10,000 a year. I'll pay you $25,000 a year.
Yep.
And you could just walk away.
I mean, back in the day, they wanted to keep their developers, right? It wasn't like today where we know that guy made these 5 and, well, who do I want to work? Which game developer do I want to go with?
Yep.
And back then it was like, I got 5 guys that know how to make a game. I don't want to tell anyone who they are.
This guy graduated from Harvard with a degree in computer engineering. You're hired. Make a game.
Make game good.
I don't care what it is. I don't care how stupid it sounds. Make a game. You're a circus performer and you jump on a teeter-totter. Done. Circus. It exists. That's the whole game.
Oh, you're a lion tamer that whips at lions jumping through the air. Carnival. Huzzah!
You're a ship. You shoot rocks. Rocks spawn infinitely. It never ends. Asteroids. One of the most popular games on the whole system. Shoot rock. More rock show up. The end.
Demons take over Earth, and you have to fire a gun at them. Demon attack. It's just like, it didn't matter what idea. It was the simplest ideas that could get out, get put onto a computer system to be played in a home. Atari was trying it all. And
yeah, man.
If it wasn't for them...
No shame. There's 3D tic-tac-toe on the NES, which is a blue screen where you play tic-tac-toe, so no judgment.
In my opinion, if it wasn't for Atari, I don't think home video consoles would be the thing they are today. There would not be as big of a push. Even though they ultimately failed in the end, they pushed 10 million units out into the world. And today, I'm sure, Josh, you hear this at your work. I'm sure there's people that come in looking for like Ataris every so often. Probably few and far between because where we are.
And people ask. I feel like people mainly ask me as a joke. They're like, "I bet you don't got any Ataris in here." I'm like, "Yeah, dude. They're like $55." They're like, "Wow, really?" I'm like, "Yeah, dude. They're not that rare, man. They sold 10 million units, dude. Yeah, they're not rare."
I would say I've been very blessed to be able to have access and have found all these early game consoles. I know it's always fun to show people, like, here's an Intellivision, here's the Magnavox.
It's cool. It's historical. No offense to these consoles. I know people spent their lives working on this stuff. Games suck, man. A lot of them are just not fun.
A lot of them are awful.
But that's just like... That's how it was, right? When you were a kid, it was like...
I mean, that's all they had, right?
So, like, when you're playing circus and they just jump on the teeter-totter forever, kids back then were like, holy crap.
I also want to preface...
I bet you can't jump on the teeter-totter 25 times.
I want to interject this into here. We did sit down and put caps on pens for 20 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was great, man. I had an amazing time doing that. If there was an Atari game where you did that forever, dude, see ya. I'd play that. That'd be the best game on the damn system.
So, I mean, it's all dependent on, what you can think of, what's entertaining and everything, but, like, the history behind it's
there's
there.
A basic programming cartridge for the 2600. You can just program.
There's a color tester cartridge. Like back in the day when like they would color test the screen.
Yeah.
You had like the yellow bar, the white bar, the pink bar, the red bar, the blue bar.
Yeah.
They have a cartridge that just does that. That's all it does. Like
video games are awesome, man.
Yeah. The horrible thing is we laugh at that today, right? Like, oh my god, they have a color.
Back then, I bet that was so useful to have that stupid thing.
Yeah, because
right?
like you had to dial in like your grays and your blacks on like some of those really old TVs.
Yeah. Or
or your contrast, and you had to make sure it was sharp and everything.
Yeah.
That was a big deal back in the day. So, I mean, like, all this stuff, as much as we might laugh at it, as much as we go, man, a lot of those games sucked. I have a fondness for the 2600.
There's charm to it. I had a plug and play when I was a kid where I played a bunch of the Atari games for a long time. So it's... I have a certain fondness for it. As much as I make fun of Circus, that was probably the one I played the most, but... I definitely have a certain fondness for a lot of
Every
that
once
stuff.
in a while, I'll break out my actual 2600, and I'll sit and play for a couple hours and have the time of my life. It's more of just an appreciation of the art that went behind it and what it accomplished back in the day.
Yeah.
More than like, oh, do I want to play my 2600 for a couple hours, or do I want to play like the brand new God of War? Like,
right.
It's all like just it's more of a fun aspect rather than I love this aspect.
Yeah.
But Yeah, there's plug and plays if you want to play the original. There's no need to go out and buy an actual system and all these cartridges.
Hell, you can play most of them online for free if you really want.
Yeah.
Asteroids has been remade 1 million times. Breakout's been remade 1 billion times.
Also, it's good to mention, we're not talking about pricing or anything, but like, you know, a console is like $50,
$60, $70.
Yeah, cartridges are
Don't pay more
10.
Don't pay more than 85 probably.
Yeah, I paid $30 for mine. But like the big thing to take into consideration, if you want an actual console, they are in rough shape nowadays.
Yeah,
people did not take care of these things.
Man, we're talking 50 years, right? Like damn near 45, 50 years. When stuff doesn't hold up well, and especially if you have a modern TV, you're gonna be putting the work in to get it to adapted.
Yeah,
so.
For me, when I plug in these really old consoles, when I have people over to play, because I have a Commodore 64 that I love breaking out and showing people because they're just like, this is crazy. I can't believe this is a thing. I have a CRT from 95 that is running through a VCR that I plug in the systems into. And that's how I get a picture out of it. To get it to work, even on like console or televisions from the 90s, you're putting in some work to get these running. Like, these are not plug and play. These are now an effort to get going. But you know what? Hey, it's fun to show to people. It's fun to break them out. You know, go grab your plug and play that's a red and a red and yellow cord that you can just plug straight into your TV. That's the way to go. You know, Josh, said they're online for free. It's hard to find good quality consoles and cartridges now because they have been put through the mud, literally, half the time. But I think that's going to conclude our retrospective on the 2600.
We did it. We talked all about the 2600. And now we're going to go chronologically in order. So next week we're going to talk about the PS5.
And then after that, we're going to talk about the television.
And after that, we're not going to talk about anything. And we did them all. The 2600 and the PS5.
Thank you for coming to our retrospective TED Talk today about Atari and their mistakes.
Now you know everything about Atari because we talked about everything. We didn't leave out any details, I'm sure.
Yeah, there's no big gaps in years or anything.
No, absolutely not. We nailed it all. The 5200 and 7800 don't exist, and we don't talk about them because they don't exist. So perfect. No, there is obviously a ton more information out there. I recommend you do your own research if you want to keep learning about it. We're just kind of trying to give a general overview of the concepts.
Trust
so
me,
know a little bit.
Trust me, Atari made plenty of mistakes within those consoles. The 5200 especially.
If you keep doing digging about how much money they lost, yeah, a lot of those statistics are online. But the next one we're probably going to do is probably just jump into NES, kind of the next big one. Revived video games from the video game crash of 83. They said, that's it, video games are dead. Then Mario came along to resurrect video games. Bring them back from the dead on the NES. So that'll probably be our next retrospective. We don't know when we're going to do it. We're thinking maybe monthly, bi-monthly, something like that. Just kind of sprinkle them in every once in a while.
Who knows? We might just do this one this year.
Yeah, it's true.
We're going to feel it out, but trust us, it'll make it come around again at some point.
Yeah, we're going to do a bunch of research about the NES, and I'm sure we'll have plenty to say about that.
Thank you for listening to the Quick Save Podcast. Like, comment, subscribe.
Tell your
friends. Helps us out.
Tell all your Atari nerds friends who are out there. Tell us if we're wrong.
Yeah, tell us that you love combat so much and it's the greatest game ever.
That's not how it happened. I was there. I saw Mr. Atari.
There wasn't 14 truckloads buried in the desert.
It was 17. It was 17 truckloads. I was there.
I've been Alex.
I've been Josh.
This has been the Atari Talk.
Is that you're doing like an Atari theme?
Yeah, a little 8-bit there.
Something like that. That's pretty good.
Bye.
I don't care how stupid it sounds.